At McDonald's, there's always like a very small increase in price to get like an additional 100 milliliters for your milkshake, and yeah, this is like one of the things they do. I watched the movie Frozen, and you also watched that. We both liked that. And then Netflix determines, well, we have the same taste in movies. And an example from my own classroom, there was a guy. He said, "Yeah, I was identified by my bank as a fraudster, for example." And and it was.
Alan, thank you for joining us today. Welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to
Thank
have
you.
you again. That we spent, what was it, 5-6 months together during Erasmos in Switzerland. That was in Epfl 10 years ago.
Yes.
So quite a long time. And what's interesting and what I like about you, Alan, just tell you right away, is just the smile. Always smiling, always never mad, you know. And that's just pretty nice to have people like around like that with this kind of good vibes, right? So Alan, I'll let you maybe introduce yourself. Tell us more about your professional career, your personal self. How can you define Alan from your perspective?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. What we studied together was innovation management, but
Innovation,
I've
yeah.
I steered quite a bit of let's say off track afterwards. So I got a PhD in human technology interaction. So I started working on what is called recommender systems, and that is basically what you would find if you start your Netflix or your Disney Plus or YouTube, any algorithm that provides personal content. I got a PhD in studying how that would work for people changing their behavior, first in saving energy, later in eating, later in news. And that's now where I got me to be an assistant professor in persuasive communication at the University of Amsterdam in the Netherlands. So the main thing I do is educate people on the one hand, the perspective of marketing communication, but on the other hand, on digital technologies and persuasion. And on top of that, I also spent a year living in Norway on the west coast in a little city called Bergen or Bergen.
Yeah, Bergen, it's nice city, cute city.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's of course well, perhaps a fun fact about Bergen is that it holds the record for the city which with the longest consecutive days of rain, 81 days. So that's like the
should be depressing. No, I think so.
Yeah, well, especially in autumn and winter when the sun sets at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, then it's a bit depressing, of course.
We can't complain here in Barcelona. Like I moved here from Paris a while ago, so we still have sun and like people swimming till November pretty much. So it's not. There's nothing to complain.
Yeah. People in Bergen also swim, but they just are used to the cold water. That's the big difference, Yeah. So, but there I lived there for a year, but then I still worked there 1 day a week, virtually, mostly as an associate professor in recommender systems, and I'm affiliated to a research center called Media Futures for Responsible Media Technology. Okay. So I have a bit of a dual identity when it comes to my university life.
Yeah, nice. We'll go back to this recommender system because I'm very interested in knowing the psychology behind it and the variables that go into the algorithms and stuff. But maybe first we can give a big insights, Alan, about behavioral economics, right? It's a field that you are probably familiar with, and also I got to study during my PhD as well a bit. And so it's very interesting to understand that first, why do we talk about economics? Because it's part of our lives and it's important, right? I mean, the whole money in our lives is an important variable, right? Which makes some people happy, makes others miserable. So it's important to just take it into consideration in the self-development sort of path, understand the logic behind it and the psychology behind it. And so in economics, we have this idea of, we are rational creatures, right? That's the basic classical economic theory that we call, if I remember, it was Homo economicus, something like that. And we make decisions based on rationality, and we make the most optimized decisions all the time. But yeah, I'll let you go into this and why isn't it correct and what's the field of behavioral economics?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I got a lot of psychological training, and that's of course economists and psychologists. They always clash a bit about this part where whether humans are actually
Yeah, true.
rational beings, and so behavioral economics actually tries to bridge these two disciplines by incorporating a lot of human biases that sort of conflict with them being rational actors. And I think one of the main people that has pointed this out already in psychological research, Daniel Kahneman, who wrote a book. I think I have it here. Yeah, Thinking Fast and Slow. Yeah, there's a blur, so it doesn't really matter that I show it to you.
You can put it in front of your face, maybe it can work. But
yeah,
not sure about that.
Yeah.
I think in Fast and Slow it's like a bestseller. It's got very like reference in the area. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I think I've also used it in a course, and it's basically, let's say, a pop science book, but at the same time it contains so much interesting insights that you can use it for academic courses as well. And one of the main things that it shows is that already depending on how you present information. So let's say that I give you a gamble between two options. So either
Excuse me. How about we try the whiteboard just for people to sort of catch the idea? That would be interesting, I think, if you can draw a bit. Do you have access to some tactile?
Yeah, I mean, if I cannot.
Yeah, I tried it once with a guest, and it was very interesting to just.
Okay.
Yeah, it's more fun, I think, to share.
All right.
Collaboration, create. I will create that. Normally, we both have access to it. All right, cool.
All right. Yeah. So I think there are a lot of different things that you can do in that respect, but one of the things that Daniel Kahneman has done over and over, so he has sort of bugged a lot of her participants with this, is to give them a sort of a gamble and to say, hey, you either get 90 euros for sure, or you get a 90% chance at 100 euro. That's like one thing. So what would you pick? Like
yeah, I mean, I did some studies, so I know, like, rationally speaking, what it means. But if I had to choose, okay, if I have to choose from a human perspective, I would take the 90, right? 90 euros.
Yeah, no,
it's a sure win, right?
Perfectly fine, right? But then on the other hand, he would also give like the opposite thing, in the sense that he would say, hey, you're gonna lose money. Either you're gonna lose 90 for sure, or you're gonna have a my handwriting has not improved. 90% chance at losing 100 euros. What would you then choose? Would you choose that you lose 90 euros for sure, or would you take the 90% probability that you lose 100 euros?
Yeah, probably I'll go with the probability, right? So at least you can have some chance to win, right?
Yeah, this is at least what Daniel Kahneman would then show in studies and studies. So this is what is called part of prospect theory. So people, basically what he calls it, losses loom larger than gains. So people are afraid to lose money. And when you can gain money, then uncertainty is sort of a factor that people are afraid to lose something. But when you are actually facing a certain loss, then people are willing to take risks to avoid that. But from a, let's say, Homo economicus perspective, these are the same things.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Can you explain why?
Have a preference.
People didn't do that much math. I would suppose not all people, I suppose, do math. So why is it the same thing? Like why is it the same thing?
Yeah. It's because 90% probability of 100 euros. If you do that, let's say, over and over, then the expected outcome of that bet would be 90 euros. So if you do it, let's say, an infinite number of times. So in the long run, both outcomes should be exactly the same.
Same, yes. Exactly.
And that's so any rational person would know that, and it would make let's say, it would choose randomly probably, but
yeah, it doesn't make much difference from a rational perspective, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because of the law of big numbers, but then as humans, like from a psychological perspective, we don't like to lose. We rather get, when we want to win, we'd rather get something sure. But for losing, we'd rather gamble and have like at least a small chance of not losing than like a sure chance of losing, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think another famous Bay for economist, Richard Taylor, and perhaps you've heard of him authoring a book called Nudge. So
Yeah, not just
together with yeah. So he would always do this experiment with his classroom at the beginning of the semester. So he would divide the classroom in half, and half of the class would get a mug of the university, and the other half would not get one. And those would get the mugs, well, they can sort of look at it for 5 minutes and, I don't know, be happy that they got a mug. And then he would ask these people separately, hey, how much do you want to sell the mug for, or how much do you want to buy the mug for? And what he then finds is that the people who have just gotten this mug, regardless of whether they actually value it, they put a price on it that's, I think, 2 to 3 times higher than those that don't have a mug. And this is also like one of these examples where, once you have something, you want to sort of hold on to it. And
has an emotional value,
called,
right, as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, how emotional can you be to a mug that you only got 5 minutes ago? But it's that is what he called the endowment effect. That whatever you have, you just take in, you place more value on it. So if you, let's say if you have some kind of small sculpture, maybe from your grandparents, and you inherited it, and you're gonna sell it, you're always gonna ask a much higher price than anyone is gonna sort of willing to pay for it. Yeah.
Which is not rational, which goes against rationality of just a perfect market, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So how can we like, for example, not avoid, but how can we be more conscious of such sort of this kind of flaws? It's sort of flaw in decision making, right? Or it's called also heuristics, whatever you want to call it, biases. So how can we get more aware of that? Is there a technique, or is there a way to just be more aware, apart from reading books, of course, and watching videos like this?
Yeah, I mean, even those who are, let's say, trained or got PhDs in this field, they might fall into traps from time to time. And it's simply because a lot of decisions that we make are very fast and intuitive. We don't really think about them too much. And when we don't think, then we still fall into the trap. But when you do think, then of course you have the opportunity to improve yourself. And I think it's important to signal in situations, for example, let's say you browse a web shop and you suddenly see a lot of discounts, that you ask yourself, well, why is this specific product here? Or why is there a discount? Should I be skeptical about a previous price, or should I be skeptical about let's say, the context it is presented in? Let's say there could be sort of counter heuristics about you signaling some kind of warning signal about, hey, I might actually be manipulated here, or I might actually fall into some kind of trap. So let's say,
this is the notion of nudging, right? Like, so people who may not be aware of the nudging, so just using some stimulus in the environment to sort of influence your decision making, right? Because the marketers, neuromarketers mostly, have this knowledge of how human beings mostly take decisions. So they may put some sort of, like, for example, I remember whenever you want to go buy something online, you have 3 formulas generally, right? You have cheaper formula, medium one, and the expensive one. And like the medium one is like sort of, they want you to choose the medium one, right? Because it's the most, and so they make this big difference between the other ends of the spectrum. So you have sort of this feeling that you got the best value out of the money, right?
That's indeed one of the things they do. They could also do it differently. They could also make the medium, let's say, value very close to the small value, so that the small one looks, let's say, much better. And because of that, people might choose that one, for example. So I think at McDonald's, there's always like a very small increase in price to get like an additional 100 milliliters for your milkshake. And this is like one of the things they do, because you feel like, hey, I already paid, the step towards small is already quite big. So then maybe I can just increase it even more. And then the large sounds like a bargain, even though you might not actually need half a liter of milkshake.
Yeah, absolutely. I got it's more better example. And the one thing is interesting here is that it's the way you perceive money will influence also your decision making. So if you are, for example, if you know what you exactly want from something, you just go and you want to buy something because you have a certain need, right, as a human being. If you exactly know your need and sort of what are the solutions that may answer your need, then you may maybe avoid just being like draw to left and right to other products that you may not be your first purpose, right? So there is a sort of mental control here, emotional control over what you want as a human being, I suppose.
Yeah, no, I think you're right about that. I think the let's say the more of a plan or the better of a plan that you have. For example, if you go and buy a TV in a store, what are the main things that you would care about? Maybe how big is it and how expensive is it, and maybe a bit of the colors. But if you then go to a store, then you're typically presented with like a list of 20 different features that you haven't thought about up front, but that you're like, whoa,
oh,
well, maybe this.
Why not?
Yeah. I mean, well, there is apparently like a green pitch football mode. I think I saw something like that once when I was buying a TV.
Green
like
pitch.
the pitch
football fans.
Okay. Yeah, that it looks a bit greener, that it's nice or something. The store seller couldn't really explain it to me, but and then you start to put weight on these features that you don't even care about, and then somehow it then builds up, a little bit of preference if there is some uncertainty in yourself. And maybe that whole point about people being rational beings is that many of the preferences that we have are just formed upon the stage of actually making a decision and seeing the alternatives. And the more of a plan you have, the more you can avoid being influenced. But I think behavioral economists strongly believe that all preferences are very context dependent, and that you might be steered away from the initial TV that you liked by the green pitch color, for example.
Yeah, I see your point. So the stimulus around us will influence the decision making on the moment or before the moment of making the decision, right?
Yeah.
But if you want to buy a house, for example, you may plan it in advance, put the budget, put the things that you want, etc. So it's more like rationalized a bit, depending on the amount of money that you're going to spend, I suppose.
Yeah, and that's like one of these type of decisions where even psychologists advise people to sleep at night on it, because somehow you then make a better decision. But because
emotional.
Not being emotional. I mean, there could be like, let's say you go to a house and there's like a swimming pool, and you're suddenly like, oh, I've always dreamed of having a swimming pool, and then suddenly you overvalue the price of the house because of this, let's say, emotional thought that you have. So I mean, having emotions can definitely benefit the decision-making process, but in some cases it can also undermine it.
I totally agree. Alain, I like this bias or heuristic of relativity, of the price, which is, I find it very interesting, right? Can you maybe elaborate on that? When you go, for example, buy a car and they put things on the side with higher price in general, right? So the car is 20,000 and there's something to add for 500 euros, right?
Yeah. No, this is.
So this is easier to just put the more things, right? And you don't feel it's expensive. It's fine,
Yeah, no, that's that's I don't know if you've ever bought, for example, a house, but when I bought a house, suddenly there are all these big costs that seem very little, and then you go back and you reflect and like, oh, did I really have to pay some guy who signed the contract 600 euros or something? You're like, whoa, what is going on? And then the same with the car. Yeah, like, oh, it's just 500 euros on a car of 20,000 euros or something like that. Oh, why not? Oh, seating, heating, why not? Yeah. If you're I don't know, if you really like, if you really like a car, for example, you're suddenly like, I can have these features, I think I deserve it. I think I want to have something better. Whereas upfront, you would never think about these features. And indeed, it's a good point that the relativity of the price, things might seem small, relatively speaking, and then suddenly you start spending money. And
but the funny part is sometimes when you go buy something for a market, for example, supermarkets, you buy like I don't know, milk for 2 euros, let's say, and then there is another supermarket which is like 200 meters from the corner, but it's like 1 euro 50. You're like, okay, I just take the walk. It's cheaper there, so why not? Right? So you just negotiate 50 cents. But when it comes to a car, 1,000 euros plus options, it's fine. It's just 2% of the price.
Yeah. I think it also has a bit to do with humans also do some mental accounting, and then let's say we associate, of course, a lot of costs with cars, and as soon as we sort of put the expenditures for a car into this, let's say, this basket of car money, then I think we also let's say mitigate the impact that it has, because for groceries we think, oh, every penny saved is important, but for cars we think, well, it's gonna cost us a lot of money anyways, so let's not look at every penny that we spend.
Sounds right. And I just want to finish on this finance part before we move to the recommender system, which I find also an interesting subject. What could you advise, for example, to people in general, not necessarily the not necessarily the PhDs of this world and the smartest and like normal person, right, just living everyday's life? How can they enhance their finances just by doing some small tricks to sort of be more conscious of how the spending goes, right? Should he make baskets? Should he use some apps? Should we what's your recommendations on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, there are many things that you can do, but let's say one thing that sort of works for me financially and in terms of eating not too much is, I mean, if I make a grocery list each time I go to a supermarket, that already helps a lot to just restrict myself to very distinct decisions, because then, let's say if you have milk on your grocery list, then you can make a clear decision for milk, and it's not sort of ambiguous what you're going to pick, and you're not going to spend too much, for example, and you also can sort of make the clear put clear boundaries on your decision making.
So it's like a list on your phone, and you go and just check, and that's it, right? So that's how we
it sounds very old school, but at the same time, I mean, not only does it help me to sometimes save money, but also to, let's say, not buy too many bad food for myself, and to not gain weight or something. So I think that is one of many things that you could do.
That's about planning in general before going into a purchasing decision, right? Mostly when it's a business.
I think the more goals and commitment that you have, the less let's say sensitive you are to persuasion by others.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it's not a cure for everything, but at least it will help you a bit to keep a straight face.
That's definitely a good one. And how about, for example, baskets, or a basket for food, basket for transportation, basket? Is it something that's also is good for managing?
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good suggestion, because if you once you know a bit how much you can spend on each of these categories, then you the feeling of overspending is then sets in more quickly, and then you have the more boundaries you have, the easier it is to stick to them, I guess. So that's and it's also an example of this mental counting, of having different baskets in your head.
I remember it's like a bit of building a good habits, like if you read some books like Atomic Habits or other things. The idea of, if you don't want to watch TV, just put the remote control, hide it somewhere, right? Or ask your friend to hide it, right? Or if you don't want to eat fast food, just every time you eat, just pay your friend some sort of money, right? 5 euros, 10 euros. So this push yourself to just stick to the plan in a way, right?
Don't put let's say, don't put the peanuts right in front of you, but put them somewhere where they're difficult to get.
That's a good example of the book, I remember. Okay, Alan, that's fun. Let's switch to the other team, which is recommender systems. How does it work from an algorithmic perspective? So just explain to people, like in terms of data inputs and outputs, how does the whole process work for Netflix, or another example? I don't know.
Well, Netflix is a very prominent example, because when it comes to recommender systems, they actually handed out a prize at some point, I think in 2009. So at some point they held a competition, and they had an algorithm to recommend movies to people, and I think this was even in the where they would still even mail order DVDs, so that there wasn't even a streaming service. So Netflix really started as they give advice to you by post, and then you can order some DVDs to rent. So what it basically does is a recommender system in an interface where you are presented with options that suit your preferences, or that are the most relevant to you. So in the case of Netflix, you would be presented movies or TV series that suit your taste. But about that price, there is an algorithm running to determine that. And already 15 years ago, Netflix handed out $1 million for a 10% improvement on their accuracy of their algorithm.
$10 million. That's impressive. Okay.
Yeah. So eventually, nobody in the first round reached 10%. I think the best was like 9%. But accuracy, what that means is that when we watch videos on Netflix, or if we buy something, doesn't matter, then we leave a lot of data traces.
Yeah.
And each line of data will then indicate, let's say, for example, a rating of a movie, or thumbs up or thumbs down. And you can take all the data and then predict for another user with another movie whether that user is going to like that movie. And with such an algorithm, you can predict for the data you have as well how well it's going to do that. And you can also then compute some kind of accuracy, like how good are the ratings that we are predicting for the movies we already know. And then 10% improvement is quite a lot. It might, let's say, it has some kind of business value. The better the algorithm is, the more Netflix thinks that people like to keep using their service. And one way how that can work is that if you like a movie from a certain genre, that you get more movies from the same genre, or movies with the same actor, or movie with the same title. But that's just one way that an algorithm can work. Another way is, let's say that I watched the movie Frozen, and you also watched that. We both liked that. And Netflix determines, well, we have the same taste in movies. But then I also watched the movie, let's use a French classic, Taxi 2. And then Netflix might say, hey, I can recommend that movie to Nizar because they have the same taste, but this is a movie he hasn't watched. And that would be then called like sort of collaborative filtering. So you identify who are similar to each other, and then you recommend the missing pieces to the users. So
so you make like sort of clusters, right, of similar interests, right?
So we all are sort of neighbors in some kind of digital space where we have are sort of mapped in terms of our preferences. And maybe if we have to watch the same movies, then we are, like, to say, Netflix neighbors. And then Netflix will say, hey, maybe one that Nizar liked, but Alain hasn't watched that. Maybe we can recommend it to Alain.
There's more chance for you to like it too. So
exactly.
So it's really about prediction of a being that is hard, like that is, let's say, not easily predictable, right? I mean, if I give a bone to a dog, there's 99% chance that he will come for a bone, right? But for humans, we have this flexibility of saying no, or having different variables to our history, our background, our likings, and so on, our genes, that make us different from other beings or creatures, right? So what are, for example, the variables that may enter into the play? You talked about thumb up, thumb down, for example, for Netflix. Are there any like hidden, more psychological traces that tell you this like something or doesn't like it, or like could be the time of watching, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of data that say that they have to interpret. So let's say that if you watch half an hour of a movie, would you then say that you didn't like it, or are you just coming back later to it because you didn't want to watch it now? Let's say there are a lot of ambiguous signals that Netflix has to take care of. So your example with the dog and a bone, it's pretty clear what sort of let's say the incentive is. But if you do something on Netflix that's not sort of explicit but rather implicit, so you scroll through a library, you search for something, and you watch something for a little while, then they have to interpret, like, what does this actually mean? And then they are just trying to see whether their assumptions check out with reality. So Netflix is sort of performing probably a lot of continuous experiments on us by showing each user a different interface based on different principles, and then seeing, well, do these dogs bite? Huh? Do they like the bones we are holding in front of them?
I think in IT it's called A/B testing sort of thing, right? So You just provide different things and see if there's more engagement with the platform or not.
Yeah.
But what about the ethical side of it, Alan? Like, do you think it's sort of, for example, for Instagram, Facebook, and all these platforms, obviously their business model is based on engagement and just being there most of the time. What is the ethical part of it? Shouldn't be like there's some training for users or some indications that says, you know, like you watch X amount of time, it's enough. You know, I don't know. Like, just what's your perspective on this?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question, because all these algorithms are basically optimized for engagement, like you say. And what the difficult thing then is that they don't care about what you do as long as you do something.
Yeah.
And that makes it very mindless. Yeah, I mean, if you would even notify users of how long they are already spending time on a certain platform, I mean, that's already quite something, right?
Yeah. Not bad.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, because with, I mean, Netflix now does it, I think, after 3 episodes, like that they ask, hey, are you still there? Or, yeah, I don't know exactly the exact number. But let's say that if you're already spending half an hour continuously scrolling somewhere or watching TikTok videos, yeah, then this app should also think about, yeah, what are you actually doing here?
Yeah, I mean, it's like the what's the name? The regulation in Europe, GDPR, right?
Yeah,
For protecting the data and making sure that your data that you give is sort of protected and kept in safe by the company. But there could be some sort of also like regulations in this area, right? Like just making the user or pushing companies to notify the user that, you know, that after an amount of time on the platform, are you there? Are you alive? You know, like if yes, enough for the day, you know, or something like that. Just or training some sort of videos of awareness, right? Like these ones and others.
Yeah, I think that what might help is that, let's say, a lot of this mindless scrolling, that it's, I mean, I wouldn't immediately call it a clear addiction, but let's say we spend so much time on digital devices that that sometimes we need a little bit of help, especially because this, let's say, reward system of social media that you get a like and you get your little boost, positive
dopamine,
boost.
right?
Yeah, exactly. Then that's a bit of a crooked reinforcement cycle that tries to keep you there. And I'm not sure if regulations could really break that up, but at the same time, just making people aware, or let's say, at least agreeing that there is a problem with a lot of, especially younger people that are maybe
exactly.
spending.
I'm seeing people like from 14, you know, 15 years old. I mean, they don't have this mind capacity to judge or criticize yet everything. So for me, it's like a big thing, right? It's like, at least if you do something, you should regulate people, let's say below 18 years old or below whatever age, right? Just yeah.
I mean, I also noticed it with myself that as years went by, and you start doing more on your smartphone and start to use it for more purposes, it is harder to pay attention, even for me, at some, for example, conferences or presentations. But then imagine that if you are now in high school and you constantly have these notifications popping up, and you're constantly distracted, I think it's super difficult to pay attention to, even at school. So I think in the Netherlands, they are now experimenting with a few schools that it's no longer allowed to use your smartphone during, let's say, class time or even school time.
That's also what I'm pushing my students not to do, like just avoid their phones. Now they're even trying to do presentations with the phone. They can't even like just just try, you know. But that's another topic. Alan, we just have like a few minutes left. Can you give me in 2 minutes what's your view on AI? Because we have this big boom of AI. Obviously, everybody will just start using it because it makes life easier, more productive. What's your view on it? What's the next in 10 years, 20 years? Where do you see AI going?
I think AI can do great stuff if we still understand what we are actually doing. I think there are a lot of mindless developments, in the sense that we don't know exactly what algorithms do, what the AI is predicting. We just see the outputs, and I think that can disadvantage a lot of people. One of the it goes so fast that I think the most important thing with AI is to try to keep track, because I think it creates a lot of beautiful stuff, but sometimes there are parts of the population that are being disadvantaged or being overwhelmed by it. And I mean, but even an example from my own classroom, there was a guy, I think he had a Middle Eastern background, and he said, "Yeah, I was identified by my bank as a fraudster, for example."
Oh.
And and it was basically because he had a wrong last name, and then this algorithm or AI was sort of just taking some kind of higher hit rate or something. And I mean, it's a bigger story than that. Even in the Netherlands, we actually had such an algorithm trying to identify fraudsters with tax, and it was completely ridiculous. But again, based on, let's say, the bad assumptions. And with AI, I think we can make our life much easier and productive, but I think we can also really amplify the bad things that we are currently doing in society, and that's sometimes scares me a bit. So I'm very techno optimist, but I'm also trying to be a bit skeptical, so that not some part of us are lost along the way.
Yeah, I guess what you mean. I mean, it's depending on the data and how you train it, right? How you train this AI system, it would provide some outputs that sometimes even developers will not understand. So, and that's so you don't know how it's used. Like, is it going to provide you with the right output, or with some output that's biased, for example, right? Depending on the data that you put in it, right? And there was this example of an AI. You put too much data in it, and then it gives you that the criminals are mostly like from like black collar, right? Because it's the data that you put in the past is just based on history, which was sort of biased in a sense. So look, Alan, we'll stop here. It was very nice to catch up. I think it's a very deep topic. If we can talk about it for hours, right? But it's not the idea here. It's just making people aware that we are not always rational. We think we have a mind that's very smart and very intelligent, obviously, compared to other creatures, animals. But yet sometimes we are just prone to following our emotions, the stimulus in the environment, so we are sort of data-based creatures too. So we just, based on our past, we may make decisions that are not optimal, right? So not necessarily rational.
Well, it's a bit maybe like my driving instructor told me when I took driving lessons. He said, "Alain, I'm gonna teach you how to drive. Just do like me. I have a driving license, so if you drive like me, it will be fine." And I think maybe internally it also works with ourselves. We just tap into our past experience.
Yeah, that's a nice example. Well, Alan, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
We'll talk again. Yeah, sure. And take care of the family, and see you soon, maybe, right? Okay.
Yes. All right.
Ciao.
Bye. Have a good day, man.
You too. Okay, guys, thank you so much for watching the video. That was Alan, and that was a nice talk about just how we are not always making decisions rationally. And sometimes it's good to be emotional and just follow your feelings, right? Intuition and so on. But just pay attention that many stimulus around you are trying to control you in a sense, and that you are not really aware, that you're not really awake. So wake the F up. And yeah, guys, I'll see you in another podcast, in another video. Take care of yourself. Bye-bye. Ciao.